talk of today. We are very pleased to have Kostas Yampos here with us, and he will tell us about integral deformations and asymptotic limits. So
okay.
Please, Kostas.
So let me start by thanking the organizers for giving me the opportunity to present my work here and for this nice organization. So I'm going to talk about you some integral deformation, as this can be derived from asymptotic limits. The talk will be based mainly in this work that has already appeared, and work to appear with George Itzios and Kostas Fetsos. George is among the participants. So a slight introduction motivation. So in a normalizable field theory, among other things, its quantum behavior is encoded within the beta function. So this is the running of the various couplings, let's say lambda, with respect to the energy scale. Usually, such quantities are determined perturbatively, loop by loop, and the question is whether in a particular setup we can compute a no-loop beta function. If so, will it have some kind of non-perturbative symmetries? Would it be able to compute to have an all-loop effective action encapsulating all these loops? And furthermore, would it have some kind of new fixed point towards VIR? So let's say I start from AUV, I perturb and I flow. I perturb with a marginally relevant operator. So we'll study such kind of issues and also the asymptotic limits in the two-dimensional non-abelian Tyrin model, which I will introduce, and its effective action. So the key points is first I will introduce what is called the non-abelian Tyrin model, then its effective action, then I will go to study a concrete two-dimensional example with what I'm going to say about this asymptotic limit, then also consider some kind of other additional three-dimensional limits, and then this is the work that will appear. This will be some kind of other type of perturbations in the CFT, which are known as Kersild perturbations. I'm going to introduce what is Kersild at that point, and then I'm going to conclude. So, non-abelian Tyrin model. So the starting point will be the Wezzo-Minowitten action, which is a two-dimensional conformal field theory described by this action. So this is, let's say, the kinetic term, and this is the Wezzo-Minowitten term, and it's invariant under left and right current algebra symmetry. This is K, this is the level of the action. For compact groups, let's say SU2 or things like that, this is an integer and K is quantized. For the non-abelian Tyrin model is defined as follows. I take my Wezzo-Minowitten model for a group element G and my level K, and I perturb it via this operator. At the conformal point, the currents are defined by these equations. The right Moré-Cartan and the left Moré-Cartan pull back on the plus and minus Wall-Street coordinates. At the conformal point, this operator is marginal. 1,0, it's 1,1, but away from the conformal point, this kind of deformation will, in principle, break conformal invariance. So let's see some properties of a non-abelian Tyrin model as it was studied in late 80s by works of Kutasov, for the non-abelian Tyrin model. So first, the operator which drives the perturbation is marginally relevant. What this means? It means that at the conformal point, this is 1,1, but away from the conformal point, it picks up an anomalous dimension, and the beta function is non-vanishing, and is given by this expression. Here, for simplicity, I took my matrix deformation, lambda, here, to be just the diagonal, isotropic. Mu is the energy scale, and what appears here, this is nothing else than the quadratic Casimir in the adjoint representation, and it's given by this expression. The F's are real, and CG is positive. For example, for the SU2, this is 4, for the SU3 is 6, just an integer number. The corresponding effective action exhibits, and this is quite important, the exhibits also the beta function, what's called a weak-strong duality. So Kutasov, using some kind of path integral techniques starting from this action, he was able to show that schematically what it would be the effective action would encapsulate this kind of symmetry. So lambda goes to its inverse as a matrix. K goes to minus K for large values of K. And the question, which one part of the story is, can we construct an effective action which will encapsulate all this kind of symmetries? So using a gauging procedure, as it was done by Kostas Fetsos in 2013, he was able to find that an action of the following form. So I start from a Wieso-Minowitten model at group element gain G at level K, and this is perturbed by this operator. Here was again my currents, the plus and the minus, but in the middle is not just the parameter or the matrix lambda, is dressed also by D. D is the adjoint action, which takes us from the right Moré-Cartan to the left Moré-Cartan, and its expression in terms of components is given by this expression, and it's an orthogonal matrix. There was already in the literature some almost 20 years ago a brute force analysis, but it was working for the SU2 case by these authors. So let's say why I call it effective action. Let's see some properties which this share with the non-abelian Tilling model. First, it exhibits a weak-strong duality, in a sense that if I take my action and I take K, so in the parametric space, K and lambda, so let's say I take K to minus K, lambda to lambda inverse, G to G inverse, then this will be equal to my original action, and this holds for K, and this is for K much larger than 1. This is an exact statement at the level of the action. I'm just saying that the symmetry, so it's this symmetry. Secondly, for lambda, so it's explicit, you can work it out here. So for lambda much smaller than 1, in this kind of expression, this is the leading term, and this is subleading. So you can see that for lambda much smaller than 1, it truncates to the non-abelian Tilling model. For simplicity, and only for simplicity, I took lambda to be the isotropic matrix. So here is just the parameter lambda, not the matrix. Note that for lambda equals 0, we obtain the Wieso-Minowitten model, as it was previously, of course. More properties. As lambda goes to 1, and we expand the group element around 1, so taking lambda around 1, this is a singular limit. Why it's a singular limit? Because if I go over here, as I told you, D is an orthogonal matrix, and taking lambda equals 1, this matrix here, it's 1 minus an orthogonal matrix, so its eigenvalues, the eigenvalues of an orthogonal matrix are the complex roots of the identity. So in a sense, it cannot be inverted. Or in a sense, it cannot be inverted. So I have to make, as I take lambda goes to 1, I have to also to expand the group element around to 1. Doing this kind of limit very carefully, one finds what is called as the non-abelian T-dual of a principal chiral model. It's given by this expression. These are the data of my expansion. So now that I have this model, let me go a step back. One can work out the one-loop beta function using the standard gravitational techniques. So going for this background, compute the generalized, compute its Ricci tensor, its torsion, and using these properties, one can find that the beta function, as we did in this work, also there is also this work using an alternative approach. One can compute the beta function at one loop. One loop means here leading order. One means 1 over k. K here plays the role of the alpha prime. In particular, alpha prime is 1 over k. And it's given by this expression. So what it describes a flow from the conformal field theory, which is the Wieso-Minowitten model, in the UV, towards the IR, which is the non-abelian T-dual. And on top of that, so you can see, sorry. So and in addition, this is a classically integrable model and its charges are in involution. So why I call it effective action? Because it serves with a non-abelian Tilly model. The same type of symmetry, lambda goes to lambda inverse, k goes to minus k. Here it's explicit. And it has the same beta function. And there are also other properties. It can also be shown, but it has the same symmetry algebra. Okay, these are more or less the introduction. So let me go to a concrete example. So let's say the simplest example one can work out is taking the two-dimensional example. So one can take the lambda deformed SL2R over SO1,1. This is non-compact coset, where I take lambda AB. So how I derive it? I take my lambda AB, the matrix, to be the diagonal lambda, comma 1. This, in a sense, it can. So I take this limit and I derive this action. So the third component drops out, and I find this so here I start from my two-dimensional CFT at lambda equals 0. This term drops out, and on top I have the scalar, which is given by this expression. At the conformal point, lambda equals 0. This will be the Dylan. Properties of this action. This is a classically integrable action, and its charges are in involution. So they Poisson commute. So it is integrable in a sense, it's integrable in the Hamiltonian sense. It is also normalizable at one loop. One can work it out using standard techniques. And its beta function is given by this expression here. Note that it starts from order lambda. I will come to that later. Here, the properties of a beta function. This is linear on lambda. So the operator which drives the perturbation, this positive, is an irrelevant operator, and its dimension is given by this expression. So it's 2 plus 2 over k. It also respects the weak-strong duality, this model. So lambda goes to lambda inverse, and k goes to minus k. It also exhibits another kind of symmetry, which I take lambda to minus lambda, and I shift my coordinate phi by half. Here, the dependence of the beta function is rather simple, so I can integrate out easily, and the expression is rather simple, and it's given by this formula. So in the IR, as mu is equal mu 0, then in the IR, lambda equals 0, and as I approach UV, lambda goes to 1. So for large energies. So let us analyze now what is the UV and the IR. At the IR, we obtain the lambda equals 0, we obtain the SL2R, SO1,1 gauge Witten model, as was described by Witten in this work. So this has this form, and this is its dilaton. Towards the ultraviolet, there are two distinct limits. First, the limit that I described to you previously, where I take my lambda to be expanded around 1, but I also expand my coordinate, the group element around the identity. How I do it explicitly in terms of the coordinates, I just zoom in the coordinates around 0 by taking this kind of ratios. What I find is a non-trivial action in what's called the non-abelian dual of the hyperbolic H2 space. However, I could think also of another limit now that I have explicit my model, where I do not expand around phi equals 0 and rho around equals 0, but I will expand also only phi around p halves. So how I do it? I again take lambda around 1 with the same scaling, and I do the following expansion. So what I find here, I don't find, like previously, the non-abelian dual of the hyperbolic H2 space. I find the abelian dual of the hyperbolic H2 space. And this was something that we found previously, recently in this work. Okay, so now let me go towards let's say, the main part of the talk, which is the asymptotic limits, and see how the picture changes between these interpolations from the ultraviolet to the IR. In the large rho limit, the model that I presented previously takes this expression. So where phi, this scalar, is given by this form. Properties of this model. Firstly, excuse me for a moment. Firstly, it shares the same symmetries in the parametric space lambda and k as the original model. It has the same beta function as the parental model, I mean the model before taking this asymptotic limit. The model is also classically integrable and its charges Poisson commute, and which is a property, of course, consistent with the parental model because it came as an asymptotic limit of that. And let's see some other properties, the key properties. For lambda equals 0, you can see that in this action, this line drops out, this term drops out here, so it drastically simplifies, and this just becomes 1. So it drastically simplifies to this expression after passing Euclidean. So what we obtain a free scalar times a linear dilaton background. So let's see whether this limit encapsulates the initial also central charge. So one can work it out as usual the central charge. So we have a free scalar, the phi here, its central charge, plus the central charge of rho, which has this kind of linear dilaton background, and one working out properly the various central charges and taking into account the normalizations, one finds the same central charge as the parental model. So this is the central charge of SL2R at level minus k, minus 1 for the cosetting. And of course, I expand it to leading order in 1 over k. So let's try now to understand the beta function. So the beta function here, I go and I expand my action around lambda equals 0. So as I told you, the leading part is this one, the subleading at order lambda takes this expression. So the scaling dimension of this perturbing operator, it equals to the following things. It's 2, 1 plus 1 from here, plus h and h bar, where here h and h bar are going to be the scaling dimension of this kind of vertex operators. Doing it properly, one finds 2 plus 2 over k. So by working out the beta function, this is the classical, the engineering dimension, one finds that at leading order in lambda, this is its beta function. In principle, from field theory, one could have subleading order in lambda squared. But we know that working out the beta function at the level of the background at one loop, so leading order in 1 over k, yields this expression. Okay, the important point. So as I told you, from the IR as lambda equals 0, I start from a free scalar times a linear dilaton background. But where I flow, as UV goes to 1, I take lambda around 1 and phi, I expand it. This is nothing more than the previous expression that I gave you for large rho. This leads here to the hyperbolic H2 space written in Poincaré coordinates. So let me recapitulate. What I told you is the following, but if I take the lambda deform SL2R over SO1, this model interpolates between SL2R over SO1, CFT towards the non-abelian dual of H2. But in the large rho limit, the picture changes, and in the IR, I get this kind of free scalar times a linear dilaton background, and in the UV, I get the hyperbolic H2 space. So one could say this very simple example. How about higher dimensional ones? The picture remains unaltered, and I'm going to say just the basic points, the focal points, without technical details. So one consider, for example, the three-dimensional case, SO3,1 over SO3, and its lambda deformed version was constructed in this work and still normalizable and integrable. So there is a Lax pair and the charges are in involution. And in an analog asymptotic limit, I just dismiss all the technical details. The form of the action is rather simple and can be given by this expression. The W is given by this formula, and the scalar is given by this expression here. So in the IR, here again I can compute the beta function. It's given by an analog form. So in the IR, at lambda equals 0, I obtain, if I set lambda equals 0 here, you can see that this part goes to 1 because W just becomes 1. So I get 1, this is also 1. So I get the SO3 over SO2 conformal field theory, along with its dilaton, minus log cosinus theta, plus, this is a spectator at the level of the metric, but I have this kind of chart. So I get the SO3 over SO2 times a linear dilaton background, described by this formula. Towards the ultraviolet, as I'm taking lambda goes to 1, and of course this is a singular limit, so I have to zoom in, my model truncates to what is called the hyperbolic H-free space written in global coordinates. Okay, so let me say this is in the original model. If I take lambda goes to 1 and I zoom in around the group element, I will get its non-abelian dual. Okay, this is, so here is the interpolation. So let's see another interpolation which is even more interesting. Let's see interpolation between exact CFTs. So here my CFT was only at the IR point, and I was flowing towards the UV, where I will have my strongly coupled point, where was the pre-spark iron model. So let's consider now a case a bit more involved, but I skip all the technical details just to get the key message, where I started from the SL2R minus K1 times the same thing minus K2 over SL2R minus K1 minus K2 cosette CFT. Its lambda deformed version was constructed in this work. This model, as we have shown, is classically integrable, and in addition, its charges are also in involution. So they Poisson commute themselves. So there is a Lax pair, and the Lax pair just as a technical note, the Lax pair satisfies what's called the Maillet algebra. So its charges are independent from each other. Its beta function can be worked out explicitly using gravitational techniques and takes this form. Lambda 1 here, lambda 1, lambda 2, lambda 3, and lambda f are functions of K1, K2, which are rather lengthy, so I skipped the details. The important thing is that the model and its beta functions here are invariant under the following symmetry. This is a variant of the previous symmetry. However, if I take the original case, if I take equal levels, K1 equals K2, then this goes again to lambda goes to lambda inverse. However, having different levels, and this is quite important, my model my model interpolates between two exact cosette CFTs. At the IR is given by this expression, and at the UV is more or less follows the same pattern with a shift of the levels. So mine with a replacement here goes to that expression. So this is an RG flow from the IR towards the ultraviolet. Okay, so the model here admits an analog asymptotic limit, an analog asymptotic limit, and the derived model, as we did in this work, but I skip the details, is also classically integrable, and its charges are in involution. It is also normalizable at one loop and shares the same beta function. However, the RG flow here alters, and instead of having this picture, it goes like that. So we have, it flows between vessel 2R over U1 at level K1 plus K2 times a linear dilaton background, and goes towards the ultraviolet. We get the following CFT. Okay, so you can see, so the key message to take, this is the first part of the talk, and this related to the work that has already appeared in June, is that by taking the asymptotic limit, the interpolation that were there in the original model change, and we start from for the equal level case, we start from the compact conformal field theory times a linear Dirac backgrounds towards the ultraviolet, where we would have the pre-Spark-Iyer model, not its abelian dual, and in this case, where we would have unequal levels, we flow to another CFT, exact CFT. Let me see. Okay. Okay, so this will be the new part.
Excuse me, Kostas, what happens when K1 is equal to K2?
So if K1, right, if K1 is equals to K2, I go here. This will be the following. My model will flow from the IR, which is VCFT, but towards the non-abelian dual of a pre-Spark-Iyer model on this coset. There is not going to be an CFT at the ultraviolet. That's why I took unequal levels. And in addition, this kind of, perhaps you can say it complicated symmetry, truncates to the standard one. Lambda goes to 1 over lambda. But the important thing is that by having two different levels, unequal levels, and this is also the case, even in the group case, by having unequal levels, I'm able to flow between exact CFTs. So that's why there is in the story unequal level. Okay, and this is also depicted also at the asymptotic limit, as I told you. Even at the asymptotic limit, instead of a pre-Spark-Iyer model, I have a CFT at the UV end. Is it okay? So let's apply what is called in the literature in the general relativity Kerr-Schildt deformations in conformal field theories. Let me start slowly by the following thing. I take a metric. Consider that you have in general relativity a metric, G mu nu, and I call it with G mu nu 0. And I perturb it with a current bilinear, with a vector bilinear, not current bilinear, a vector bilinear where, and I parameterize the overall coefficient by a function V. What are the properties of this vector? The properties are the following. The vector is null and is also geodesic. Geodesic meaning it satisfies this property. So the pullback of its covariant derivative, so the directional derivative of my vector lambda equals to 0. Why this is important? This was studied in '65, more or less. I think it was 2 years after the Kerr found the Kerr metric, and it has the following form, which is very nice. The linearized Einstein's equations for the metric G mu nu, the perturbed one, are also the exact ones. So the Ritz tensor with mixed indices, up, down, truncates at leading order. If you lower them down, it goes up to second order. But the important thing is that you don't have the post-Newtonian is also the exact form. Then you can ask, okay, how does this kind of simplistic thing encapsulate classes of metric? Yes, it does, it's the answer. So for example, you can start the simplest example. One can start with a flat space-time, 1,3, written in this form. So the time, and this is the R3 component. And from that, by using this expression here, one can construct or reconstruct, if you like, starting from the flat space-time, the Ricci flat Schwarzschild metric. The V is just the classical Newtonian potential, and L here, this kind of L is given by this expression. So L is null, so L square is 0, and it's also geodesic. Of course, one can say this, but this is a very simple example, but the ideas can be extended also in other cases, also by including angular momentum, and this was done in the original work. And it's something quite nice. The non-trivial thing is someone has to rewrite this thing in another form, some kind of what is called some kind of spheroidal coordinates. And one can also include cosmological constant, and one can also include charges or matter. The important thing to keep is that by getting this deformation, getting this perturbation, the difficult part in Einstein equations, which is more or less the Ritz tensor and other curvatures, linearized. The other ones, so this is the power of a method. So let's see this method in conformal field theory. So here I have, again, I start from a target space metric here. However, instead of having charges, I will have my scalar, phi. At the level of the CFT, this is my dilaton. So I'm going to apply the Kerr-Schild ansatz, starting from the conformal target space-time metric. What's this metric? Is here. So it's very simple, it's diagonal. 0 rho equals 1, or k over pi to be precise, and g tau tau is equals minus k over pi, hyperbolic cotangent of rho square. And then you can, since it's a two-dimensional example, you can work out and find a generic null and geodesic vector, and it's given by this expression. So with indices down, this is its tau component, and this is its rho component. So one can ask now, okay, I perturb my conformal field theory here with this kind of perturbation. And I would like to demand that what will come after will be one loop renormalizable at leading order in my alpha prime. My alpha prime here is 1 over k. Doing so, because it's rather simple, it's the two-dimensional example, one finds the original action perturbed with this kind of operator here. My v that was here is given by this expression, and psi will be the diffeomorphism. It has two parts. First part is the dilaton. A second part, it's a vector, eta. Let's see some properties. Let me pause at the moment and say that the vector eta is a Killing vector at the level of a CFT, because it's just a shift of tau, however, is not a Killing vector at the level of my perturbation. So I work out my RG flows. For this method, I demand to be normalizable, and I find this solution where I have V and Xi. Xi is the diffeomorphism. So something like filter definition. I can redefine my rho and tau. So let's see some properties of a beta function. As you can see, the beta function here is given by this expression. So this is the RG flow with respect the flow of my coupling lambda with respect to the energy scale, and this is 1 minus c. However, one can say at the moment how this is possible, how it's possible that the beta function depends on a parameter which appears on my filter definition, eta. Here, eta was a filter definition or diffeomorphism, which is a Killing vector at lambda equals to 0. However, checking the action, one can see that the parameter lambda here could be absorbed in a shift of tau. One could shift tau and reabsorb lambda and set it to 1. So hence we pick lambda equals 1. This model, the model that we found here, is a scale invariant model for lambda different than 0. Scale invariant model means that its beta function is 0, but the diffeomorphism cannot be written in terms of a derivative of a scalar. This is only the case if lambda equals 0. If lambda equals 0, I find my original unperturbed CFT. But for lambda, so the key message is that doing this Kerr-Schild deformation on this CFT with a non-compact target space-time, I find a model which is not conformally invariant. This is scale invariant. Let's see some properties of this model. Firstly, one can work out its target space-time, and it resembles a black hole metric beyond the singularity by doing the similar story with written in global coordinates. Secondly, the model is classically integrable and its charges are in involution. And now comes the story how this is related with the lambda deformed model. This is related with the lambda deformed model and gain on the same coset, so I perturb this thing. This is the action. If I do in the lambda deformed model the following asymptotic-like limit. I say it like asymptotic-like limit because I will not displace also tau, but I'm going with a double scaling limit in the sense that I'm going to take lambda goes to epsilon over lambda as epsilon goes to 0. Doing so, one can derive this action. Okay, other things. Firstly, this model being scale invariant, it can be embedded to standard type 2A and type 2B supergravity. We have done it using this asymptotic-like limit in the solutions found in this work. Secondly, okay, it's the other way around, sorry. Secondly, although my solution is integrability preserving, the supersymmetry is broken here. Okay, but let's see one thing. As I told you, this model here is scale invariant. However, while invariance is restored, well, if I will take the large rho limit. If I will take the large rho limit, the cotangent goes to 1, the hyperbolic tangent goes to 1, and I get this model. This model here, its beta functions are also vanishing. However, my diffeomorphisms here can be written in terms of a dilaton. And in particular, one can work it out, and we have done it, doing a coordinate transformation. One can find the SL2R at level K coset CFT, which has some kind of cosmological interpretation here. Note by, as I told you, while invariance is restored, and this is the conformal field theory. This is at lambda different than 0. If lambda equals 0, this term drops out, and I have just a free scalar here, tau, a free scalar rho times a linear dilaton, tau, time like, and this is my dilaton. Okay, this is the two-dimensional example. However, one can say that.
Sorry, question. So for general rho, did you embed it in some modified supergravity or?
So here, you mean for this expression?
General rho, yeah.
Yeah, no, this is the standard supergravity.
But it's not while invariant.
This model is scale invariant. So one can use the solutions found in this work by Fetsos and Thompson. And one can, so in that work, they took the lambda deformed SL2R over SO2 times SU2 over U1 times T6, I think. And one can work out the same asymptotic limit and find the solution of type 2A and type 2B supergravity. Okay? It's not the modified supergravity, this kind of generalized. I will come to that point. Here, let me say it at this moment. Here, we didn't do some kind of formal T-duality, but I will come later on. Here, it's just a double scaling limit of the original model. So this model here has an embedding in type 2A and type 2B supergravity with appropriate Ramond-Ramond forms. F2, F4 at the level of type 2A, F5 at the level of type 2B. At this action, we just took this kind of asymptotic-like limit. So it was more or less expected if the limit is fine, but it will be again a solution of type 2A, type 2B. But I will come to that point.
May I comment here, if you don't mind?
Yeah, please.
Is this Sibyl?
Yes.
Well, hi, Sibyl.
Hi, Cosmo.
I think the clarification comes from the fact that in the embedding, we didn't use the diffeomorphism that includes eta, but just the diffeomorphism that includes phi. So we have the usual supergravity.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
So at the Einstein's equations of the supergravity have the Ritz tensor and the dilaton and the Ramond-Ramond flux. There is not this kind of the Lie derivative thing of a vector. That vector is expressed in terms of a scalar, this scalar. Sorry. Yeah, minus log super. Yeah. Okay. So let's now go to a more non-trivial example. So the results here can be extended if one takes the lambda deformed SO2,2 over SO2,1 coset CFT. And analogically, one can consider, so this background does not possess an isometry to the conformal point. However, taking an analog limiting procedure, we take an analog limiting procedure which involves the parameter lambda. Here, analog I mean to the limit that I told you. Again, the derived model, and I skip the details here, can be seen as a Kersel deformation of the asymptotic limit of the underlying CFT, and the underlying CFT in this asymptotic limit. This is also classically integrable, but also scale invariant. So again, what I'm doing, because perhaps it was fast, I start from this model. I do an asymptotic-like limit, asymptotic-like in the sense of this. I have also a backup slide in case, in like this. So I take my coordinates, but I also make a rescaling of my parameter lambda, so this kind of double scaling limit. This model comes up to be a Kersel deformation of the asymptotic limit of the underlying CFT. It's also classically integrable, but it is, as in the two-dimensional case, this is scale invariant, not Weyl invariant, so the diffeomorphism is not expressed in terms of a dilaton. So the beta function is 0, but it's not in terms of a dilaton. One can ask, is there Weyl invariance? Yes, there is Weyl invariance if I take another asymptotic limit, some kind of large distance limit. And in that case, for lambda non-vanishing, I get vessel to R at level 4K over SO2 at times RCFT. If lambda equals 0, I just get R squared times a linear dilaton background. Let me come to this point. So this kind of coset CFT, okay, coset CFT, so I'm starting from the conformal point, was also considered in this work by Ben and Arkady, where they took an analog asymptotic limit, which does not involve, of course, the parameter lambda. And then this work, by taking, so they started from the original coset CFT. This does not possess an isometry. First, they took an asymptotic limit, analog to this one, apart from the fact that we also have the lambda, so it's a double scaling limit. And then by taking this asymptotic limit, they found an isometry. This isometry was at the level of the target spacetime metric. However, the dilaton was depending on a coordinate. Then they did this kind of formal duality in a sense that the dilaton had a dependence on that coordinate. And then, although the original model was Weyl invariant, what they found afterwards is, and also described in this work, the derived model after this formal duality, this is a scale invariant model. So again, they found a scale invariant model, but the construction is different because it came after a formal duality. In our case, we just take the usual lambda deformed model, we perform the double scaling limit, so again asymptotic-like limit, but we make the interplay with the parameter lambda. And this yields the scale invariance. Okay, so let me conclude on the first part and the second part. On the first part, I told you some kind of asymptotic limits where we consider lambda deformed models for cosets of non-compact groups. And then we found, as I told you, a new zoom-in limit of the lambda deformed model, for example, this one, where we find the abelian dual of a Prisc-Parkale model, or even, the abelian dual of a Prisc-Parkale model on hyperbolic H2. Then, okay, we also studied the interpolations of this model of a lambda deformed SL2R over SO1,1 and of a lambda deformed SO3,1 over SO3. The first case flows between a free scalar times a linear dilaton background towards the H2. Okay, this is in the asymptotic limit. And the second one, the three-dimensional case, flows between this kind of coset CFT times a linear dilaton background at VIR towards the UV. I skipped here, this is the UV, where we get the hyperbolic H-free space. Then, as a non-trivial example, we're getting more involved in interpolations. We consider the lambda deformed model of this coset at different levels, and we found that interpolates between two exact CFTs times a linear dilaton background. Key message here, as I told you, is the different levels. Different levels allowed us to have interpolation between exact CFTs. Well, now let me conclude on the Kersil part. On the Kersil part, what we consider is we consider a Kersil deformation of SL2R over SO2. We saw, as I told you, we have shown that this is classical and integrable, but it's also a scale invariant model. Its target space-time describes a scale invariant black hole and can be embedded in standard type 2A, type 2B supergravity by taking this kind of asymptotic-like limit in the solution of Kostas and Dan. And as a plus thing which enables to understand the limit is that this kind of asymptotic limit, by taking an asymptotic limit, we can find this kind of Kersil deformation from the lambda deformed SL2R over SO2 model. So although we did it via Kersil, we can find it from the original model by taking this limit. So let me say some outlook, some future remarks. First thing is that it could be interesting to study this kind of asymptotic-like limit and study the conjecture for general cosets, symmetric cosets, and see the interplay if it goes again like CFT at d-1 dimension times a linear dilaton background towards the UV where we'll have the hyperbolic space. We did it, we have done it for 3 examples, but it would be this to study if this kind of interpolation holds. And on the Kersil perturbation, which I find quite interesting, it would be interesting to check whether the scale invariance holds beyond the 1 loop order. So by taking my CFT and going at the CFT level takes also 1 over K corrections, taking Kersil perturbation and check whether the scale invariant persists. We have some partial results, and this seems to be the case. Also, one can think about Kersil perturbation at Weissenberg-Witten models and also gauge Weissenberg-Witten models on group and symmetrical set spaces, generic symmetrical sets. Of course, one could consider also Kersil perturbation not of conformal cosets, but also of geometric cosets. And for example, the SU2 over U1, or one could consider even more general cases like deformation of symmetrical sets, like the Jack-Baxter deformations. And as I told you, although we found a solution to type 2A, type 2B supergravity, this is scale invariant and integrably presented, but it breaks supersymmetry. So it would be this to check whether this solution, it's not at the conformal point, so it will be this to check whether it is stable or not, using techniques that were already used in this work. Okay, and with that, I will conclude. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Kostas. Are there any questions? I see already a few here.
I have 2 questions. The first one about the signature of your target. If you have this symmetry, discrete symmetry, lambda goes to 1 over lambda and K goes to...
Sorry,
if you have this discrete symmetry, lambda goes to 1 over lambda and K goes to minus K. And it's probably that those 2 terms in the action, the Westermino term plus correction conspire that you keep the same signature of the background if you perform this transformation. You know, if you go with K to minus K, normally, if you have just Westermino model, you change the signature of the target. But if you have this other term, it may conspire with the first term, and if you apply this transformation, you keep the same signature of the target. In your case, for example, is 1 time and several space variables. This is what I mean by signature. In a compact case, you have just all space variables if you apply the symmetry. But if you go to this higher limit, then you have a tensor of just Westermino-Witten models with levels which may have different signs. So in my opinion, this should change the signature of the target unless there is some conspiration between the several
You mean
parts of the tensor product. So can you comment on this?
here? You mean at this point, at this symmetry?
Yes, yes, at this point, yes.
So the point here is that my CFT here, my model is unitary. If I take my lambda goes from lambda equals 0 from 0 to lambda 2, and my levels are positive. If I invert, if I take the levels here,
Mhm.
the model will be again unitary, but in a different domain.
No, it's not a question of unitary, it's a question of the signature of a target space. One time and several space variables, that's it. Then my second question about unitary of H3 space, because you didn't specify the B field as, if I understand this correctly. Sometimes you say that you have a model on H3 symmetric space. And the question is whether this model is unitary when we speak about that.
It's fine.
Is it unitary?
I think so.
You think so? And this signature of the target probably is not a problem because of some compensation between the factors of tensor product.
So here I start from my CFT at lambda equals 0. This is a compact CFT.
This is
compact also.
Yes, and if you
Not
apply
compact,
this,
but it's
k to minus k, what happens?
If I take the point is that if I take lambda k goes to minus k, my lambda has to be bigger than 1 to keep the same signature. If this is what you're asking. So to maintain the signature, so here for this signature, lambda goes from 0 to 1, and k is positive. If I take lambda goes to lambda inverse and k goes to minus k, my lambda for the same signature will be, as far as I recall, is from 1 to infinity.
So does it mean that you break the symmetry in the infrared?
Okay.
Break the symmetry in infrared?
Yes, this lambda over lambda and k to minus k symmetry. It remains the symmetry when you flow from UV to IR all the time. It remains the symmetry.
Can I say something?
So here,
Yes, Kostas, maybe you want to say.
Just if you look at the first term in the action in that transparency,
Yes,
if you invert lambda,
yes,
obviously you will get 1 minus 1 over lambda square. So you multiply by lambda square, and
yeah,
and it becomes negative. So
Yes,
by
yes,
flipping the
that's-
sign,
that's the point.
sign of k,
yeah.
flipping the sign of k gets back to the original form.
Yes.
Is that what you are asking?
In this particular case, this doesn't change the signature. But when you get to this UV and there was some transparent, yes. So look, there are some Wess-Sumino-Witten model where you flip the change of K.
Okay.
And this changes the signature, you know.
The last, maybe if you look at the last line there is
Yes,
K1
yes.
minus K2, correct?
Yes,
In this construction, maybe it could have been written K2 is larger than K1.
Yeah.
So it's still negative.
so you suppose that K2
Yeah, you can choose one of the two to be bigger. So you choose K2 to be K1, larger than K1. So the level there is still minus parenthesis K2 minus K1, close the parenthesis.
As I see, the first term has a level minus K1, isn't it?
so here is minus k1, minus k2, minus k1, minus k2.
And the line
Here is minus k1, k1 minus k2, and minus k2. But for this interpolation, of course, as mentioned, but I skipped the details here, k2 is bigger than k1. Okay. So it's fine, still fine.
Well, I believe you, you know, but this was
If
question.
k1 was bigger than k2, then we would have an interchange of k1 and k2. So this is the story. One chooses either one to be bigger than the other. So here we have taken K2 bigger than K1.
Okay, I believe you that. So the signature does not change.
No, no.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi, Bob. Thanks very much for the talk. I have a question about these Kerr-Schild type geometries. So this 2D geometry that you have this lambda dependence, and then you said that you can just set lambda to 1 by a change of coordinates. So if you make an infinite shift of the coordinate tau, then you can actually you could set lambda to 0. So okay, that's an infinite shift. So yeah, maybe that's a kind of degeneration, but you might think, I mean, is it obvious that this lambda dependence does anything? You know, is it obvious that it's actually a different model, or it could just be some rewriting of the same CFT?
It's definitely not a rewriting because we have checked, and the diffeomorphism cannot be written in terms of a scalar. And in addition, one can work out also the global picture, if you like, and it's not what would be the black hole at the lambda equals 0. So
Okay.
this is not a conformal invariant model. This is a scale invariant model. And the reason is this one. For lambda equals 0, it is my original CFT. But the Kerr deformation, what it does, so lambda is there, but in a sense, as you said, it can be absorbed in a shift of tau. So there are so it's not a continuous deformation, lambda, as it is. It's either 0 or 1.
So you switch it on.
Yeah, if you switch it on, you can rescale it to any value that you like. Let's pick a 1.
Maybe you were. If it's like you switch it on or off, it sounds like some kind of equality related to the original model.
T-duality, okay, so the original model is here, and taking a T-duality with respect to which direction? Rho, perhaps. I don't know. I don't know.
What is the question? What is the question? We cannot hear it, at least I
I cannot
cannot.
hear you even then.
That better?
Yeah,
It's better.
I think so.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, I guess what Nat might have in mind is something like some non-abelian T-duality with respect to some.
You mean between this action and the other and this action?
Yeah, there are examples where you generate deformations by non-abelian T-duality. That is all. But sorry,
This-
But here, even if I start,
I mean,
the
it is
first-
not obvious. I mean, I don't think you will be able to see just by staring at the action. I think it
The
would.
first action, the only symmetry that has is the U1 shifts of tau.
No. It would be some hidden symmetry or something.
No
it would be
local
more-
hidden symmetry. You can
Yeah,
check.
I mean, it
that.
would be more
but
complicated.
Dan, would be possible to start from a conformal action and then going.
But
to scale
non-abelian
invariant-
T-duality can have a Weyl anomaly, right?
If it's a non-simple group, yes.
Yeah,
If
sure.
it's not, but in this case, I don't know. I have to check it out.
No, it's not obvious at all. I
Yeah,
think.
it's not obvious.
There's no symmetry corresponding to, except for tau goes to tau plus a constant in the first
I
line.
think you're talking about a formal duality on the road direction.
No,
I
what-
suggest to continue the discussion, maybe Slack or somewhere else, and then we have one more quick question online.
There is a question from Stein van Tongeren in the chat. I will read it. Hi, Kostas. Thanks for the nice talk. Is there an interpretation of your zoom in / asymptotic limit at the level of the group that is not directly working in explicit coordinates, but rather in terms of some operation at the level of the action in terms of G abstractly?
This
And
is
in parentheses, sorry, I finish. In parentheses, he adds, perhaps this helps when considering models in any dimensions, ?
let's say this is one of the things in the outlook. So we don't know at the moment how to do this in general. Doing with such kind of asymptotic limit at the level of a group element. Consider.
Okay. And maybe another question that I had, could you comment more on the physical significance of this asymptotic limit? Because as I understand it, it's not really one way that you have to understand better the parent theory, because you already showed you have in some cases a model that is only scale invariant, and then after the asymptotic limit, you get something that could be Weyl invariant. So what is the physical motivation to do this? Could you comment on that?
So first thing it was, we checked it. So the way that we found it interesting in the sense that we start from our original model, which is conformal invariant. We do this kind of perturbation, and this is a scale invariant model. This does not preserve Weyl invariance. And in a sense, it would be interesting even to further study this thing, because if you take this limit, as I told you, at the level of beta function is vanishing. I think also anomalous dimension. So one would wonder, studying this kind of scale invariant theories, what could be the correlation functions and 2-point function, 3-point function? Would they maintain the same form as in the conformal limit? So by taking, the picture is rather clear when we have a CFT, even the perturbations. But in this case, as I told you, the perturbation is not a continuous parameter. Either it's 0 or 1, so it would be easy to further study such properties of this background. And I don't think it's a coincidence, but the perturbation with this kind of null deform, with this null vector or current null vector maintains scale invariance, but I don't have more to say at the moment.
Okay, thanks a lot. If there are any further questions, of course, you can contact Kostas here in person or online. Let's give him another warm round of applause. Thank you.